I know there's so many people out there that love the idea of moving abroad, but are intimidated about having to learn another language. And I get it. You can't remember your high school Spanish or French or even German. And so the idea of having to resurrect that in your 30s or 40s or even 50s is daunting. But I'm here to assure you that language acquisition can happen later on in life. And the previous literature that says that language acquisition stops after a certain age, specifically 10 years old, leaves a lot of information out there. And there have been subsequent studies to support that older people, and I mean people in their 30s and 40s, can absolutely gain fluency in a language if certain conditions are met. So specifically, there was a fascinating study on language acquisition and explores how age, learning methods, and life circumstances affect our ability to learn a second language and achieve fluency. So there were several linguistic investigators that calculated based on about, 500,000 people in order to make a fair estimate of when is the critical period for achieving the highest levels of grammatical fluency and when it ends. So they turned to the biggest pool of applicants that they can get, and that is via the internet. And they created a short online grammar quiz called Which English that tested noun, verb agreement, pronouns, prepositions, and relative clauses, among other linguistic elements. And from the responses, there was an algorithm that predicted the tester's native language and which dialect of English, such as British English, American English, or Australian English, whichever one they spoke based on this pool of applicants. And it worked. So they sent out this announcement for participants to participate over the internet, and they attracted over 100,000 hits per day. And it was shared 300,000 times on Facebook, and it made the front page of Reddit and became a trending topic on 4chan, where a thoughtful discussion ensued as to how the algorithm could actually determine which dialect of English the applicants spoke. And the study also brought in native speakers from 38 different languages, including 1% of Finland's population. And based on people's scores and information about learning English, the researchers developed models that predicted how long to become fluent in a language and the best age to start learning. And essentially, this test debunked the previous beliefs that language acquisition stops after a person is no longer a child. So there's a few main points, and I'm going to summarize the study, but I'll link the study in case you're curious about it. So the critical period for language learning. Children are most proficient at learning a new language until age 18, extending the previously assumed critical period by 10 years. Previous schools of thought believed that children were more proficient up until 10 years old. So this is one myth that was debunked. To achieve native-like grammatical fluency, learning should ideally begin by age 10. Previously, it was believed that prior to speech, the child's environment prior to speech was most impactful for their ability to develop language fluency. But we see in this study that actually learning should begin by 10. That the years previous to that may be inconsequential in terms of gaining fluency. And language learning ability declines sharply after age 18, though vocabulary acquisition remains relatively unaffected. So from 10 to 18 is critical periods for language learning ability, but declines after 18, and I'm going to speak about why this decline happens. Also, the test realized that immersion versus classroom learning, immersion knocks classroom learning out of the water. Immersion is a foolproof way of learning a language, regardless of the age of the speaker. Immersion, for those who may not know, means living in a country where language is spoken which yields significantly higher chances of developing fluency than learning in a classroom setting, which is more controlled and less dynamic than everyday life, where that's where language acquisition happens in like spontaneous moments of communication. Time to mastery was another component, which said that surprisingly, even native speakers take up to 30 years to fully master their language. So that lets you know if you start learning a second language at 30, it's still possible to gain fluency, and it takes relatively around 30 years, improving gradually over decades. And that makes sense because you're being exposed to more and more words and the nuances of the language, and that can only happen based on a broader spectrum of exposure. The factors that decline by 18. Remember, the test revealed that vocabulary acquisition declines after 18 and learning ability declines after 18. So the reason for that has to do with environment. It's typically that a person that reaches the age of 18, they go off to college, they may start working in a different environment, and so they rely typically on their native language, and the secondary language acquisition becomes less of a priority. So this decline has more to do with environmental factors than cognitive abilities. So this is really important to know. So essentially, we can look at the social changes that shifting focus to college and works limits a person's ability to have time to study another language. And so because they're relying on their mastered language, their mother tongue, to communicate out there in the world, and the acquisition of the secondary language is not a priority, so it takes a back seat. There is some schools of thought that also believe that changes during the late adolescent and early adulthood may also reduce language learning flexibility. This also could be based on social environment. If this new adult is engaging in perhaps more social drinking or experimentation with other sorts of things, that may impact cognitive abilities. But we don't necessarily know. That wasn't revealed in the study, but we can sort of infer that a person who's 18 may start to do more socialized drinking or experimentation with other recreational activities that may impact their brains. So essentially, this study shows that age is less important than the method of language acquisition, meaning age does not matter if the person is not immersed. Immersion is the key factor in learning a language. And so, if you are watching this and you are nervous about learning a language and that is inhibiting you from taking the steps to moving abroad, I'm here to assure you those myths have been debunked. You can absolutely learn a language. You just have to be immersed in an environment that allows you to speak, even past the point of you being comfortable. I could speak to this. I speak both Spanish and Italian. English is my mother tongue. And the only thing that helped me really grasp the language is immersion. You may say, oh, well, you're naturally gifted. Perhaps. I also have an interest in languages. It's one of my favorite things to learn different languages. As I said, I speak Spanish, Italian. I would like to learn Portuguese and French in the next year or two. So I do perhaps have an ability to pick it up, but it could also because I have an inclination, I have an interest in languages and cultures. So I'm excited about it. I could sit and speak Italian every single day of my life and be completely content with that. I love the idea of that. That invigorates me. I love learning about languages and culture. So I am motivated from a very organic place, but you can be too. So I did this video to encourage you that you can absolutely learn a language later on in life, and you can actually acquire fluency in life. You do have to take the first steps. If I were beginning a language right now, I would start watching Netflix videos, Netflix movies, or whatever streaming service that allows me to start to hear the language. Even with subtitles, allows me to sort of hear the language, see how it's used, with subtitles. I would also get a tutor. That doesn't hurt. I would start with there because you also would like to get a tutor, because the tutor will help you get the basics as to how the language is used, how the language is conjugated, and things like that. You need the basics that you can't necessarily get with just watching a Netflix video. So you need that context. I would start with those 2 steps and do the passive learning through Netflix movies or any streaming service, as well as there's another one that I would recommend, Pimsleur. That's another one where you can listen to the audio and see how sentences are formed. So hopefully these tips have been helpful. If you are concerned about your move abroad journey and you have no idea where to begin, I do have a move abroad course where you could work with me through the course, or even one-on-one sessions where I offer more nuanced information that is relative to your situation. But ultimately, the course and working with me helps you iron out the things that you need to be thinking about regarding your move abroad. What to do with your stuff in the US. Do you have aging parents? How to handle them? Are they going with you? Or how to set them up in the US so that they're comfortable while you're living in another country? Do you have Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid? How to handle those and keep those active in the event you return to the US, even just for a short time. It's good to have an idea of where you stand with them, even if you return to the US as a visitor. We also walk through the visa process. Which country you select, can you meet the minimum eligibility requirements for their visa requirements, to make sure that you're not shooting into a dark hole and there's absolutely a chance that you can be granted a visa to that country. Also, cost of living. We look at the comparison of what your income is now and how easy it would be for you to transition to the new environment. We also look at healthcare. So as you can see, it's a very holistic approach to moving abroad that addresses the concerns a person has regarding the quality of life, because let's face it, you're doing it to have an improved quality of life, not a diminished one. So it would be prudent for you to make sure these ideas, these concerns are ironed out so that you are able to land in an environment that's suitable for you. So that's what we discuss in the Move Abroad program. The link will be in the description box. Please let me know if you have any questions. Let me know about your anxiety, if any, regarding language acquisition and learning a new language. And if you would like me to share more tips on language acquisition, I will be more than happy to do that. Thank you again, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.